Okay, this is what I made. This is how I made it. And these are the learning resources I used to learn how to make this. It contains rollover buttons done with JavaScript and CSS and HTML on a background of an art project I did myself. It talks about mouse events and it covers mouse events and add event listeners. Um, if you roll over these buttons up here, you'll notice that the background changes and the contextual text inside the button changes. That's JavaScript. If you click on it, that changes to a different color, and so does the text. If you roll out from under it, it changes to a different color, the original color. Same thing here. Click, roll out. These have no color changes. They just change the text. And this is just another version with different colors. Click, mouse out, roll over. This artwork is something I did in Photoshop by myself using isometric grids. Everybody should play around with that. It's kind of interesting. And let me show you the code. I'm going to go slow. Y'all can pause the video as you need to copy things. These are the things I've researched. Event mouse, add event listeners, query selector alls. I encourage you to go into these sources and read. Transitions for CSS3. That allows this. See how it's smooth and it doesn't jump when you roll over it? That's CSS transition properties. If you go down here, you'll see it right here. There's a duration of 5 seconds. If you just put all, it does ease and out. That's what makes this smooth. If you took this off, it would be real abrupt. That's what it looks like without that CSS on there. I'll click the remove comment so I can put it back into operation. The mouse events we've discussed, and they're down here. There's a mouse over event, there's a mouse out event, and there's a click event. This is how that function looks, and there's 3 functions within inside a for loop. There's a variable called buttons, and because buttons there's more than one tag that says buttons, that returns a node list, which is considered an array, which, as y'all all know, the items of an array start out with a 0 index and then the numbering starts. So it's 0, like this button is 0, 1, 2, 3 in the node list. So whenever you use a node list like this, is when you use query selector all, that returns a node list. So it returns it into buttons. Buttons is not just buttons. You have to have, because it's a node list, you have to have one of those indexes. You have to tell what button you're talking about. If you put I there, I represents up here as 0, and then it loops through the for loop, and each time it loops through the for loop the total length of the buttons that are in that node list. So there's 12 buttons in that node list. And remember, the index starts at 0. So it loops through the node list by the length, and the length is, I guess, 13 because you start out with 0. And um, it does that until it reaches the end of the length. And each time it runs through the length, depending on what the event is that has occurred, it runs the particular function. The add event listener has two parameters. Um, the first parameter here, it can have more parameters, but in my demo, it has two. The first parameter is the mouse over, is the event, and the second parameter is the function. And this is a personal function that I wrote myself. It's This represents whatever button you are on. The object is you're inside the function. So you don't have to write buttons here again because you've got it up there. And then the property you're changing is class name. You're changing it to button active because it starts out with just a class name of button. You're adding the class name of active to it. And that's what active looks like, orange red, okay, for that particular. There's buttons here, there's buttons 2, and then there's buttons 3. Each of these are a little bit different. This button 3, you can see the object is changed to button 3i. And on button 2, you can see the object is changed to button 2i, whereas here it's just buttons I. Okay, so anyways, you've got 3 sets. This is buttons, buttons 2, and buttons 3. I took out the last letter on these because this is just a mock-up demo. And I didn't, when I was playing around with it, I didn't want the color to show, but I don't want to completely eliminate my code in case I want to put it back. Anyways, so here is the object. You're defining the object, and then you do a for loop. And inside the for loop, I've got 3 functions for the buttons object, not the buttons 2 object, not the buttons 3 object, just the buttons object, which is representative of the class button. Okay, so it calls all the buttons that have it, all the elements that have a class of btn, and it puts it in a node list. Once you get your node list, you're going to use the for loop, and it's going to call these functions, and the functions are not. You have an add event listener here, so it's mouse over and function are the 2 parameters you put in there. So the first parameter is the event, and the second parameter is the function. Okay, so calls the object. The object is this, buttons I, and it's calling the class name property, and it's changing the property from button to button active. And then it's also gonna change the inner HTML. If you are doing this live, you don't want to use inner HTML. That it involves, you can be hacked if you use that, so don't use that. Okay, and then I did another one for buttons 2 class, and another one for button 3 class, another set. I've tried to roll real slow so y'all can see and stop the video as you need to see. I also have a background image on this. Here's my CSS. Y'all probably need to see this. Okay, I did styles all. This doesn't really do anything. This isn't really doing anything. This positions my boxes to the bottom of the page, which I kind of liked. All the buttons are going to have these. All the button classes are going to have these standard properties. Active, clicked, inactive. Button 2 and 3, I changed the width and height on, and I changed the color. Button 3, I changed